The air in room 404 was thick with the scent of expensive cologne and simmering resentment. Colin Hart, founder of the billion-dollar tech giant Kestrel, sat with the easy confidence of a man who had never lost. When his wife, Ana Morales, spoke of the algorithms she built in their garage, the ones that became the company's backbone, he didn't just smirk. He leaned back, caught the eye of his lawyer, and rolled his eyes, a theatrical, dismissive gesture that echoed through the silent courtroom. But the performance was cut short. Judge Ames, a woman whose gaze missed nothing, leaned into her microphone. "Mr. Hart," she said, her voice dangerously soft, "you might want to pay attention." She then turned to Ana. "Ma'am, based on the evidence, you own half his assets now." The San Francisco fog was a constant, comforting presence in Ana Morales' early life, a soft gray blanket that seemed to muffle the city's relentless hustle. She navigated its streets with a purpose that felt both urgent and patient. The daughter of immigrants who had scrubbed floors and bussed tables to give her a foothold, Ana carried their hopes like a second heartbeat. She spent her days immersed in the clean, logical world of data science at SF State, and her nights serving coffee at The Daily Grind, a cafe that smelled of burnt espresso and ambition. It was there, amidst the clatter of ceramic mugs and the frantic tapping of keyboards, that she met Colin Hart. He wasn't like the other tech bros who used the cafe as their unofficial office. Colin had a restless energy, a spark in his eyes that wasn't just caffeine-fueled. He was a Stanford dropout with a pedigree that opened doors, but he spoke with the fervor of an outsider determined to kick them down. He was building something called Kestrel, a fraud detection startup he claimed would revolutionize online security. He sketched his ideas on napkins, his hands moving with a fluid, confident grace. Ana, refilling his mug one rainy Tuesday, noticed a flaw in his logic, a vulnerability in his proposed data sifting model. "You're assuming linear user behavior," she said, her voice quiet but firm. "But fraud isn't linear, it's chaotic. You need an algorithm that learns from the chaos, not just one that follows a rule book." Colin stopped, looking up at her for the first time, not as a waitress, but as an equal. The condescension he usually reserved for the world melted away, replaced by a flicker of genuine curiosity. "Show me," he challenged. That night, after her shift, she did. On the back of a discarded receipt, she mapped out a neural network concept so elegant and intuitive it left him speechless. It was the missing piece, the engine his beautiful, sleek chassis of a company desperately needed. That conversation was the spark. Their partnership began in that cramped cafe, built on a shared language of code and a mutual hunger to create something from nothing. Their first office was Colin's garage in the outer Sunset, a space that perpetually smelled of damp concrete and motor oil. Their desks were splintered plywood sheets laid over sawhorses. Their chairs were mismatched, salvaged from curbsides. Ana would arrive after her classes, her backpack heavy with textbooks, and they would code for hours, fueled by cheap pizza and the electrifying thrill of creation. Colin was the visionary, the charismatic frontman who could charm a rock into giving him seed money. He painted the big picture, imagining a world secured by their technology. Ana was the architect, the builder. She worked in the silent, intricate world of data, crafting the algorithms that made his vision a reality. She built the core of Kestrel, line by painstaking line of code, her fingers flying across the keyboard while Colin was out pitching their dream to anyone who would listen. The lines between work and life blurred, then vanished completely. Late-night coding sessions bled into early morning conversations about their fears and dreams. He told her about the immense pressure of his family name, the constant expectation to be brilliant. She told him about the quiet weight of her parents' sacrifices, her deep-seated need to make it all mean something. In the cold, dusty garage, surrounded by the ghosts of old lawn-mowers and forgotten tools, they found warmth in each other. He admired her fierce intelligence and her unwavering calm. She was drawn to his boundless optimism, the way he made the impossible feel inevitable. Their romance wasn't a whirlwind of grand gestures. It was a slow burn, forged in the trenches of their shared ambition. It was in the way he'd bring her a coffee, just the way she liked it, without her having to ask. It was in the way she'd solve a complex coding problem that had kept him up for nights, her solution, a quiet gift. They were a team, in every sense of the word. The decision to get married felt as logical and necessary as debugging a critical piece of code. They exchanged vows at San Francisco City Hall on a Tuesday afternoon, the grand rotunda echoing with the footsteps of strangers. Anna wore a simple white dress she'd bought on sale. Colin wore a suit he'd had since his Stanford days. There was no family, no fanfare. Their witnesses were a friendly security guard and a tourist from Ohio who happily snapped a photo for them. Standing on the steps, with the city humming around them, Colin took her hands. "We're going to build an empire, Anna," he promised, his eyes shining with an intensity that felt like truth. "Together, everything I have will be yours. Everything we build together." Anna believed him. She saw their future stretching out before them, a landscape of infinite possibility they would navigate as one. She was not just his wife. She was his partner, the co-creator of their shared destiny. In the quiet humility of that moment, with a simple gold band on her finger, she felt the unshakable certainty of their intertwined future. The first million was still a distant dream, but in that garage and in that moment at City Hall, they had everything that mattered. The first $1 million didn't arrive with a thunderclap. It landed quietly in a bank account, a number on a screen that somehow changed everything and nothing at all. The garage was swapped for a sleek, open-plan office in Soma with exposed brick and an artisanal coffee machine. The makeshift plywood tables were replaced by ergonomic desks. Kestrel was no longer a dream sketched on a napkin. It was a legitimate player, a rising star in the cutthroat San Francisco startup scene. With the new funding came new faces, and the most significant of them belonged to Derek Shaw. Derek was Kestrel's new chief financial officer, a man who seemed to be assembled from spreadsheets and ambition. He had a sharp suit for every day of the week, and a smile that never quite reached his cold, calculating eyes. Colin was immediately taken with him. Derek spoke the language of venture capitalists and boardrooms, a dialect of optics, burn rates, and leveraging assets that made Colin feel like he was finally playing in the big leagues. Anna, however, felt a prickle of unease from their first meeting. Derek looked at her not as the company's technical architect, but as a sentimental variable in a business equation he was determined to solve. Anna's contributions were the invisible scaffolding holding Kestrel up. Her algorithms were the company's crown jewels, the proprietary magic that set them apart. Her deep understanding of the system built trust with their first major clients. She could diagnose a problem and deploy a fix before their own engineers even understood the issue. She was the company's heart and its brain, the quiet, steady force that allowed Colin to be the charismatic face. But in the new, polished world Derek was building, there was no column on the spreadsheet for unseen backbone. The seeds of betrayal were sown in sterile conference rooms and glossy magazine profiles. The first time Anna saw it in print, it felt like a typo. An article in a major tech journal hailed Colin Hart as the lone genius behind Kestrel's revolutionary AI. It mentioned his Stanford days, his visionary leadership, his relentless drive. It never mentioned her name. When she brought it to Colin, he waved it away. "It's just PR, Anna. Optics. Derek says we need a simple, powerful narrative. The lone founder story sells. The narrative began to solidify, chiseled into the company's official history. Derek began quietly altering documents. On internal org charts, Anna's title shifted from co-founder and chief architect to lead engineer. In investor decks, her role was minimized, framed as a supporting player rather than a principal creator. The most chilling discovery came by accident. While looking for a tax document, Anna stumbled upon a loan guarantee for a significant line of credit. It was from months ago, and her signature was on it. A clean, perfect forgery. Her blood ran cold. She had guaranteed a massive loan without ever knowing it, her name used as a tool to secure the company's growth, while her identity within it was being systematically erased. The post-nuptial agreement was Colin's idea, but it was delivered in Derek's language. He presented it to her one evening in their minimalist, glass-walled apartment overlooking the bay. He framed it as a protective measure. "It's to protect you, Anna," he said, his voice smooth and reasonable. "If something happens to me or to the company, this ensures you're taken care of. It separates our personal assets from the business. It's just smart. Derek says it's standard practice for founders." The word founder hung in the air, a title he now wore alone. The document felt less like a shield and more like a cage. Anna hesitated, a knot of dread tightening in her stomach. This wasn't the man who had shared pizza with her on a dusty garage floor. This was a stranger speaking a language she didn't trust. She called the only person she knew she could confide in. Priya Desai, her friend from college, who was now a sharp, no-nonsense lawyer. They met at a small, dimly lit bar, the kind of place that felt a world away from Kestrel's gleaming headquarters. Anna laid the document on the table, her hands trembling slightly. Priya read through it, her expression hardening with each page. "Anna, this is a slaughterhouse," she said, her voice low and furious. "This isn't a postnup. It's a corporate takeover of your life. It assigns all intellectual property created during the marriage to the company, meaning to him. It waives your rights to any future claims on Kestrel. He's not protecting you. He's writing you out of the story." The conversation was a painful, clarifying shock. Priya's words gave voice to the formless anxiety that had been haunting Anna for months. Armed with Priya's counsel, Anna went back to Colin. She refused to be a footnote in her own life. The ensuing negotiation was a battle of wills. Colin, coached by Derek, argued for cleanliness and business necessity. Anna, guided by Priya, fought for her identity. In the end, they reached a compromise. A new version of the agreement was drafted. It was still a postnup, a painful symbol of the trust that had eroded between them, but it contained crucial clauses Anna had insisted upon. It explicitly named her as the sole creator of the core Kestrel algorithms, securing her intellectual property. It acknowledged her foundational role in the company's creation. She signed it with a heavy heart, feeling a profound sense of loss. The paper was a binding contract, but the promises that once bound them together, the promises made on the steps of City Hall, had become irrevocably blurred. She had won the battle for her name on a piece of paper, but she feared she was losing the war for the man she had married. In the years that followed, Anna became a ghost in her own machine. She was the silent backbone of Kestrel, the architect of its success. Yet her presence was felt more than it was seen. While Colin graced the covers of magazines, hailed as a tech visionary, Anna worked in the trenches. She refined her algorithms, scaled the system to handle millions of transactions per second, and led the engineering team with a quiet competence that inspired fierce loyalty. The team knew who had built the engine. The clients knew who to call when something broke. The industry, however, only knew the name Colin Hart. The erasure was a masterclass in corporate gaslighting, orchestrated by Derek and enabled by Colin's growing ego. It wasn't one grand act of theft, but 1,000 tiny cuts. In meetings, if Anna presented a technical solution, Colin would rephrase it and claim it as his own strategic insight. When a journalist requested an interview with the technical lead, Derek would politely decline, stating that Mr. Hart was the sole spokesperson for Kestrel's vision. Her name was scrubbed from the company's founding story on the website, replaced with a romanticized narrative of Colin's solitary genius. Jasmine Liu, the unflappable head of operations, saw what was happening. Jasmine had a knack for seeing the patterns in chaos, whether in supply chains or in office politics. She'd risen through the ranks on pure merit and had a deep-seated allergy to corporate dishonesty. One afternoon, she found Anna in the break room, staring blankly at a new magazine profile of Colin. "Don't let him do it," Jasmine said, her voice barely above a whisper. She slid a folder across the table. "These are copies of the initial investor side letters, the ones from before Derek rewrote history. Your name is all over them, as co-founder. Keep them." It was a quiet act of rebellion, a lifeline thrown in a sea of deception. Anna took the folder, her heart pounding with a mixture of gratitude and fear. Colin's public undermining of her grew more blatant. At an all-hands meeting, while celebrating a milestone, he gestured towards the engineering team. "I'm so proud of the work these guys do to execute my vision," he said, his gaze sweeping past Anna as if she were just another face in the crowd. Later, at a dinner with potential investors, one of them asked Anna a direct question about the algorithm's architecture. Before she could answer, Colin cut in with a laugh. "Oh, don't worry her pretty head with the technical details. Anna's the heart of this company. I'm the brains." The casual public dismissal stung more than any private argument. It was designed to diminish her, to put her in her place. The emotional distance between them grew into a chasm. The man she had married was gone, replaced by a preening, arrogant stranger. He was secretive, his phone always angled away from her, his calendar filled with meetings he never mentioned. He belittled her concerns about company culture, dismissing them as soft and not conducive to the killer instinct required to win. Their beautiful apartment felt like a gilded cage, a silent testament to a partnership that was now purely transactional. He was no longer the man who sketched ideas on napkins. He was a CEO who communicated with his wife through his executive assistant. The breaking point came not with a shout, but with a whisper. Anna was walking past the glass-walled conference room late one night when she heard Colin's voice. He was on the phone, likely with Derek or an investor. His tone was dismissive, laced with an ugly condescension she knew all too well. "Look, Anna is sentimental, not practical," he said. "She's brilliant, yes, but she doesn't understand the game. She's worried about ethics, about credit. I'm worried about the next round of funding. She built the boat, but I'm the one who has to sail it through the storm." She built the boat. The words struck Anna with the force of a physical blow. It was a casual admission of her foundational role, immediately followed by a complete dismissal of her value. He saw her work as a finished product, a thing he now owned and controlled. He saw her as an obstacle to his ambition, a sentimental anchor holding him back. In that moment, something inside her broke. It wasn't her heart, which had been slowly cracking for years. It was the dam of denial, the hope that the man she loved was still in there somewhere. She stood frozen in the hallway, the hum of the servers a deafening roar in her ears. She finally understood. He hadn't just erased her from the company's story. He had erased her from his. She went home and began to pack. It wasn't a frantic, emotional exit. It was a methodical, deliberate act of liberation. She packed her clothes, her books, and the small box of personal items she kept at her desk. Most importantly, she gathered her documentation. She had years of notes, early code repositories saved on personal drives, emails from the garage days, and the folder Jasmine had given her. She had the post-nup that secured her IP. She had the receipts. She left her wedding ring on the cold marble countertop next to a simple note. "I built the boat, and now I'm getting off." She walked out of the apartment and didn't look back. Leaving Colin was intertwined with leaving Kestrel. They were one and the same. She was walking away from the empire they had built, but for the first time in years, she felt like she was walking toward herself. The courage to leave was terrifying, but the thought of staying was unbearable. The divorce papers arrived via a sleek, unsmiling courier. They were thick, heavy, and smelled of money and aggression. Colin had hired Brent Halverson, a notorious litigator known for his scorched earth tactics and his ability to turn wives into footnotes. The petition was a work of fiction, painting Anna as a supportive, non-technical spouse who had enjoyed the lavish lifestyle afforded by her husband's genius. It was the corporate narrative, now weaponized for court. Halverson's strategy was clear. Bury her in paperwork, bleed her dry financially, and publicly humiliate her into accepting a paltry settlement. The first wave of legal motions was a tsunami of character assassination. They subpoenaed her college records, her personal emails, her family's financial history, searching for any scrap of information they could twist into a weapon. They were trying to prove she was nothing more than a gold digger, a lucky waitress who had hit the jackpot. The centerpiece of their case was the testimony of Derek Shaw. In a sworn deposition, the CFO methodically dismantled Anna's contributions to Kestrel. He presented the doctored org charts, the revised investor decks, the carefully curated paper trail that wrote her out of the company's history. He testified that Anna's role was primarily morale-based, that her coding skills were at a junior level, and that the core algorithms were developed by a team of engineers hired long after the company was established, a team that Colin Hart personally directed. It was a symphony of lies, conducted with chilling precision. But Anna was not alone. Jasmine Liu, disgusted by the betrayal, continued to be her secret ally. She couldn't testify without being fired and sued, but she could quietly supply the ammunition Anna needed. Late-night, encrypted emails arrived with attachments. The original, unaltered server logs showing Anna's commit history from day one. Email chains where early clients specifically praised Anna's technical prowess. Drafts of presentations where Anna was listed as co-founder before Derek's arrival. Jasmine was risking her career, but her loyalty was to the truth, not to the men who were trying to bury it. The emotional toll on Anna was immense. She left the sterile, glass-walled apartment and moved back to her old neighborhood, renting a small second-floor unit above a 24-hour laundromat. The familiar, rhythmic hum of the machines below was a strange comfort, a sound of constant, humble work. The smell of bleach and warm cotton was a world away from the rarefied air of Colin's world. Some days, the grief was a physical weight, a crushing ache in her chest for the man she had loved and the future she had believed in. The betrayal felt like a phantom limb, an amputation of a part of her life she could never get back. Her mother, Maria Morales, was her rock. Maria had seen the darkness in Colin's ambition long before Anna had. She didn't say, "I told you so." Instead, she showed up at Anna's apartment with pots of homemade soup, her presence a silent, unshakable source of strength. She would sit with Anna for hours, holding her hand while she cried, reminding her in quiet, steady Spanish that she was forged from a line of women who did not break. Her other pillar of support was Priya Desai. Priya was more than Anna's lawyer. She was her general. She met Halverson's aggression with icy, meticulous preparation. She worked pro bono, fueled by a righteous fury at the injustice being done to her friend. Together they spent countless hours in Priya's small office, poring over the evidence. They pieced together the timeline, matching Jasmine's documents with Anna's personal records. "He thinks you'll crumble," Priya said one night, surrounded by stacks of evidence binders. "He and Halverson are used to women who are too intimidated or exhausted to fight back. They have no idea who they're dealing with." Priya's confidence was a shield. Slowly, Anna's grief began to harden into resolve. The legal battle was no longer just about money or assets. It was about her name, her work, her very identity. Colin and Derek had tried to erase her, to turn her into a ghost. But they had made a critical mistake. They had forgotten that she was the one who had built the machine, and she knew exactly how to take it apart. The laundromat below her window kept humming, a steady rhythm of cleansing and renewal. Anna started to feel it in her own soul. The pain was being washed away, replaced by a cold, clear sense of purpose. She was ready to fight for the truth. Room 404 of the Superior Court of California was a theater of quiet warfare. The air was cold, the silence broken only by the rustle of papers and the low murmur of the court reporter's keyboard. On one side sat Colin Hart, flanked by his legal pit bull, Brent Halverson. Colin looked impeccable in a tailored suit, his expression a carefully calibrated mask of boredom. He was performing for the audience, for the press, for the judge, projecting an aura of a man inconvenienced by a triviality. On the other side sat Anna, with Priya Desai by her side. Anna wore a simple, dark blue dress. She was not performing. She was there to tell the truth. The tension, which had been simmering for months, reached its boiling point when Derek Shaw took the stand. Under Halverson's gentle questioning, he was smooth and convincing, painting a picture of Colin's singular genius and Anna's peripheral role. He spoke of late-night strategy sessions with Colin, of key architectural decisions made while Anna was otherwise occupied. He was the perfect corporate soldier, delivering his lines with unnerving poise. Then it was Priya's turn to cross-examine. She approached the stand not with aggression, but with a surgeon's precision. She started softly, asking Derek to confirm his own sterling credentials, his MBA, his meticulous attention to detail. He puffed up with pride, falling into her trap. Then, Priya produced an email. "Mr. Shaw, this is an email you sent to the board on October 17, 2018. In it, you describe the company's core IP as being solely developed by our co-founder, Ana Morales. Could you read that line for the court?" Derek paled. He stammered, claiming it was an early draft, a mistake. Priya then produced another document, a due diligence report for an early investor. "And here, Mr. Shaw, you attribute the company's entire fraud detection success rate, 99.8%, to Morales's proprietary algorithm." "Your words, not mine. Was that also a mistake?" she continued, document by document, email by email. She caught him in a web of his own lies, his smooth facade cracking under the weight of his contradictions. By the end, he was a flustered, sweating mess, his credibility shattered. When Anna took the stand, she did not speak with anger or bitterness. She spoke with the calm, clear authority of an expert in her field. She didn't talk about her broken heart. She talked about her work. She explained the architecture of her algorithms, the logic behind her neural networks, the breakthrough that allowed Kestrel to detect fraud with unprecedented accuracy. She walked the court through her early code, commit by commit, explaining the significance of each line. She was not a scorned wife. She was a creator defending her creation. During her testimony, Colin's arrogance was on full display. He smirked. He whispered to Halverson. And then, as Anna described the night she mapped out the core concept on a cafe napkin, he rolled his eyes. It was a small gesture, but in the silent courtroom, it was a thunderclap of disrespect. Judge Ames, who who had been watching everything with a hawk's intensity, made a small note on her legal pad. The audience, a mix of journalists and tech industry observers, saw it too. The mask had slipped. Priya's closing argument was a masterstroke. She didn't just present evidence, she told a story. She contrasted the two versions of Kestrel's history, the fictional, polished narrative created by Derek and Colin, and the messy, authentic truth backed by server logs, notary records, and sworn affidavits. She presented the forged loan document, with expert testimony confirming the signature was not Anna's. She presented the side letters from investors that Jasmine had provided, letters that hailed Anna as a founding partner. She systematically dismantled Halverson's portrayal of Anna as a non-technical spouse. She concluded by holding up the post-nuptial agreement. This document, which Mr. Hart's own counsel has held up as proof of Anna's limited role, is in fact the opposite. It is the desperate act of a man trying to legally seize control of something he knew. In his heart, he did not build alone. He didn't need this to protect the company. He needed it to erase his partner. Halvorson's rebuttal was loud and blustering, but it felt hollow, the desperate flailing of a man who had been outmaneuvered. Colin sat stone-faced, but a muscle twitched in his jaw. For the first time, a flicker of uncertainty appeared in his eyes. Judge Ames listened to it all, her face impassive. When the arguments were finished, she did not recess. She surveyed the courtroom, her gaze lingering for a moment on Colin's dismissive posture, then on Anna's quiet dignity. The room was silent, holding its collective breath. The stage was set. The judge leaned forward, cleared her throat, and prepared to deliver the sentence that would change everything. In the matter of Hart versus Morales, Judge Ames began, her voice cutting through the thick silence of room 404. This court has considered the extensive evidence and testimony presented by both parties. She paused, her eyes scanning the courtroom before settling on Colin. Mr. Hart, your narrative of being the sole genius behind Kestrel is a compelling story. It is, however, a work of fiction. Colin's smirk finally vanished, replaced by a look of stunned disbelief. Halverson placed a restraining hand on his arm. The judge continued, her words precise and devastating. The evidence overwhelmingly demonstrates that Ms. Morales was not merely a supportive spouse. She was the principal architect of the company's core technology. Her intellectual labor is not a footnote. It is the entire text. She picked up a sheaf of papers. Therefore, this court finds that the post-nuptial agreement, executed under misleading pretenses, is invalid in its attempt to strip Ms. Morales of her foundational contributions. The assets accumulated during the marriage, including Mr. Hart's entire stake in Kestrel, are considered community property. She looked directly at Anna, a flicker of respect in her eyes. The court hereby orders an equal division of these assets. Ma'am, you own half his assets now. The words landed like a physical blow. A collective gasp rippled through the gallery. For the first time since the proceedings began, Colin Hart looked truly shaken. The color drained from his face, his carefully constructed composure crumbling into dust. He looked at Anna, his eyes wide with a mixture of shock and something else, a dawning, horrified understanding of his own hubris. But Judge Ames wasn't finished. Furthermore, she added, her voice ringing with authority, this court orders that all of Kestrel's corporate records, historical documents, and public-facing materials be amended to reflect Anna Morales's official title as co-founder. Let the record show the truth. The gavel fell, its sharp crack sealing the verdict. The room erupted. Reporters scrambled for the doors, their fingers already flying across their phones. Halverson was trying to speak to Colin, who sat frozen, staring into space as if the world had just tilted off its axis. Anna felt a wave of dizziness. Priya squeezed her hand, grounding her. It was over. She had won. But it didn't feel like the triumphant, fist-pumping victory of a movie. It felt quieter, heavier. It felt like justice. It felt like the restoration of a truth that should never have been contested. The exit from the courthouse was a chaotic blur of flashing cameras and shouted questions. Colin, shielded by his legal team, was bundled into a black SUV, his face a thunderous mask. Anna, flanked by Priya, paused on the steps. A reporter shoved a microphone in her face. "Ms. Morales, how does it feel? You're one of the richest women in tech overnight." Anna looked past the cameras, her gaze distant for a moment. She thought of the garage, of the laundromat, of the quiet, invisible work. "It feels," she said, her voice clear and steady, "like telling the truth worked." That simple, humble statement became the headline. While Colin's PR team went into overdrive, spinning tales of a vindictive ex-wife and a biased court, the public saw through it. They had seen his arrogance, his eye roll that was now an infamous gif. They had heard Anna's quiet dignity. The narrative he had spent years and millions building was undone in a single afternoon. That evening, there was no lavish party. The celebration was a quiet gathering in Priya's small, cluttered office. Jasmine Liu was there, having tendered her resignation from Kestrel the moment the verdict came down. They ordered takeout from a local Thai restaurant and drank cheap champagne out of coffee mugs. They toasted not to the money, but to the truth. They toasted to Jasmine's courage, to Priya's brilliance, and to Anna's resilience. For the first time in years, Anna felt a profound sense of peace. It wasn't a fairy tale ending. The scars of the betrayal remained. But as she sat there, surrounded by the two women who had stood by her, she felt a sense of wholeness. Her story had been stolen from her, and she had just taken it back. Her dignity was restored, not by the money, but by the 5 words spoken by the judge. Let the record show the truth. The call came less than a week after the verdict. The caller ID showed a number Anna didn't recognize, but the voice on the other end was unmistakable. It was Eleanor Vance, the lead independent director on Kestrel's board, a woman known for her sharp mind and even sharper tongue. "Anna," she said, dispensing with pleasantries. "We have a problem. A very big, very public problem. You've seen the stock price." Anna had. Kestrel's value had plummeted. The verdict had ripped away the curtain, exposing the company's foundational myth as a lie. Clients were getting nervous, investors were calling for Colin's head, and top engineering talent, especially women, were polishing their resumes. The lone genius narrative had been a house of cards, and Judge Ames had just blown it down. "The board has convened," Eleanor continued. "Colin is out as CEO. We want you to come back." Anna was silent for a moment, the proposal hanging in the air. A few weeks ago, she would have laughed. But now she held half the company. It wasn't just Colin's legacy on the line, it was hers too. She had built the boat, and it was sinking. "If I come back," Anna said slowly, her voice firm, "it will be on my terms." The negotiations were swift and decisive. Anna, with Priya at her side, laid out her conditions. She would not be CEO. She didn't want the spotlight. She would take the role of Chief Technology Officer and Chairwoman of the board. Jasmine Liu would be appointed CEO, a move that would signal a radical shift in culture. There would be a complete, independent audit of the company's finances and practices. And they would establish a new, board-level ethics committee. Her conditions were not just about power, they were about reform. The board, desperate to stop the bleeding, agreed to everything. Colin was demoted to a vague, symbolic role with no operational power, a founder in residence. He was a ghost in the machine he once commanded, a walking reminder of the old guard. A week after she returned to the gleaming Soma office, he appeared at her door. He looked smaller, diminished. The arrogant swagger was gone, replaced by a weary, hollowed-out look. "Can I talk to you?" he asked. Anna gestured to a chair, keeping her desk between them like a barricade. He sat, his hands clasped awkwardly in his lap. "I'm sorry, Anna," he said, the words sounding rusty, unused. I know that's not enough, but I need to say it." He looked up, his eyes meeting hers for the first time. "I got lost," he said, his voice raw. "When the money started coming in, when the articles came out, I started to believe them. I started to believe I was the only one who mattered. The hunger for credit, for the spotlight, it was like a drug. It became more important than the work. It became more important than you." He confessed how Derek had fed his ego, telling him what he wanted to hear, convincing him that erasing Anna was a necessary business strategy. He told me it was just optics, but I knew it was a lie. I went along with it because I was a coward. I was terrified that if people knew how much of it was you, they would think less of me. It was a sincere apology, but a deeply flawed one. It was steeped in his own perspective, his own pain, his own fall from grace. He was sorry for the consequences he was now facing, sorry for how his actions had made him feel. Anna listened, not with anger, but with a cool, clinical detachment. She could see the broken man in front of her, the boy with the famous name still desperate for approval. She could even feel a flicker of pity for him. "You didn't just lie, Colin," she said, her voice even. "You tried to erase me. You tried to steal my work and my identity. An apology doesn't fix that. Trust is built in moments. You destroyed it, moment by moment, for years." He nodded, accepting her words without argument. "I know," he whispered. "Is there anything I can do?" "Yes," Anna said. "You can get out of Jasmine's way. You can support the changes we are making. And you can learn to live with the truth." She stood up, a clear signal that the conversation was over. He left her office without another word. Anna watched him go, a relic of a past she was determined to rebuild. Redemption might be possible for Colin Hart, but it was a path he would have to walk alone. Trust, once shattered so completely, could not be so easily pieced back together. Anna had a company to save, and she was done looking back. Anna's return to Kestrel was less a homecoming and more a decontamination. The independent audit she had demanded unearthed a culture of systemic bias and dishonesty that ran deeper than she could have imagined. It wasn't just her story that had been erased. The contributions of numerous other female engineers had been minimized, their ideas co-opted by male managers. Derek Shaw's financial dealings were a labyrinth of off-the-books agreements and side letters designed to benefit a select few. The company Colin had built in his own image was rotten to the core. With the full backing of the board, Anna and her new CEO, Jasmine Liu, began a radical overhaul. They didn't just clean house, they rebuilt it on a new foundation. They implemented transparent salary bands to eliminate the gender pay gap. They created a blind review process for promotions based on merit and code commits, not on who played golf with whom. They established the ethics committee Anna had insisted upon, giving it real power to veto projects that crossed moral lines. Kestrel was going to be a company that didn't just detect fraud, but one that operated with unimpeachable integrity. It was a slow, arduous process, but for the first time, the company's internal reality began to match its public mission. Jasmine thrived as CEO. Her no-nonsense operational genius was exactly what the company needed to stabilize and grow. She commanded respect not through charisma, but through competence. She was the anti-Colin, and the employees, weary of the old regime's toxicity, revered her for it. Anna, as CTO and chairwoman, focused on the future. She poured a significant portion of her newfound wealth into creating the Redwood Path Foundation, a non-profit dedicated to mentoring and funding young, underrepresented engineers in the AI space. She wanted to ensure that the next generation of innovators, especially young women and immigrants like herself, would never have to fight for a seat at the table she'd had to build. Her foundation wasn't just about writing checks. It was about building a community, providing the kind of support and recognition she had been denied. Priya, having won the case of a lifetime, found a new sense of purpose. The high-stakes, soul-crushing world of corporate litigation no longer appealed to her. She left her firm and joined the Redwood Path Foundation as its chief legal counsel, finding a deep satisfaction in fighting for people instead of corporations. In the calmer, more mission-driven world, she also found love, settling down with a history professor who admired her fierce intellect and her even fiercer heart. The most surprising development was Colin. After his apology, he had faded into the background at Kestrel, a silent presence in a company that no longer revolved around him. 6 months after Anna started her foundation, he reached out. He wanted to volunteer. Not as a donor, not as a board member, but as a mentor. He wanted to work with the students, to help them with their code, to share the hard-won lessons from his failures. Anna was skeptical, but she agreed to a trial run. She watched him from a distance. The arrogant, swaggering CEO was gone. In his place was a quiet, thoughtful man who listened more than he spoke. He was patient with the students, never condescending. He didn't talk about his past successes. He talked about his mistakes. He told a group of aspiring founders about the dangers of ego, the poison of believing your own press. He was teaching them the lessons he had learned too late. He never sought recognition, never asked for thanks. He just did the work. It wasn't a grand gesture of redemption, but a series of small, quiet acts of accountability. He was, in his own way, trying to repair the damage he had done, not by fixing the past, but by helping to build a better future. Anna realized that healing wasn't about forgiveness, not in the traditional sense. It was about seeing change. It was about accountability taking root and growing into something new. The trust between them could never be what it was, but in his quiet, humble service, she saw the faint outlines of a man trying to become worthy of a second chance. Not with her, but with himself. The hum of the servers at Kestrel was a different sound now. It felt calmer, more stable. Under the leadership of Anna and Jasmine, the company had not only survived the scandal, it had been reborn. Its new reputation for ethical practice and transparency became its greatest asset, attracting top-tier talent and a new class of clients who valued integrity as much as innovation. The stock price rebounded, stronger and more resilient than before, built now on a foundation of truth rather than a cult of personality. Anna found her own rhythm in this new reality. She divided her time between guiding Kestrel's technological future and nurturing the growth of her Redwood Path Foundation. She discovered that her deepest satisfaction came not from the boardroom, but from the classroom, watching a young engineer's face light up when they finally solved a complex problem. She reflected that justice, in the end, wasn't about winning or losing. It wasn't about the money or the headlines. It was about getting the chance to rewrite the story of your own worth in your own words. The court case had given her the pen back. What she did with it was up to her. Colin continued his quiet work at the foundation. A year after the verdict, he formally resigned from Kestrel's board and sold off a significant portion of his remaining shares, donating the proceeds anonymously to a fund for women in STEM. It was a final, definitive severing of his ties to the empire he had once so desperately claimed as his own. He seemed to have finally learned the lesson that had eluded him for so long, that true value wasn't measured in stock options or magazine covers, but in humility and service. He and Anna sometimes crossed paths at foundation events. Their interactions were polite, professional, and tinged with the unerasable sadness of what they had lost. There was no dramatic reconciliation. There was only a quiet, mutual understanding that their shared story was over, and they were now the authors of separate, very different books. On the second anniversary of the verdict, Anna's family gathered in her small, comfortable house, a world away from the glass box she had shared with Colin. Her mother, Maria, was there, her eyes shining with a pride that needed no words. Priya and her husband came, bringing a bottle of champagne. Jasmine was there, radiating the quiet confidence of a CEO who had earned her place. They celebrated not the victory in court, but Anna's resilience, her ability to turn the deepest betrayal of her life into a source of strength and purpose for others. That same week, the Redwood Path Foundation graduated its first cohort of engineers, sending them out into a world that Anna was actively trying to make more just. Late one night, unable to sleep, Anna found herself driving through her old neighborhood. She parked across the street from the 24-hour laundromat, its fluorescent lights casting a warm, inviting glow onto the dark street. She watched as people came and went, carrying baskets of tangled, messy clothes and leaving with neat, folded stacks. The rhythmic hum of the machines was a comforting, familiar sound. It was a symbol of the cycles of life, the pain, the cleansing, and the renewal. The stains of the past might not ever fully disappear, but they could be washed, treated, and folded into the fabric of a new, stronger whole. Anna was not defined by the man who rolled his eyes at her. She was not defined by the betrayal. She was defined by her work, by her courage, and by the quiet, steady, and beautiful act of rebuilding. He rolled his eyes in court, a dismissive gesture from a man who thought he was untouchable. But the truth, backed by years of invisible work and undeniable evidence, turned the tide in an instant. Ana Morales' story is a powerful reminder that the quiet, unseen labor is often the most valuable, and that reclaiming your narrative is the ultimate victory. It's a journey of betrayal, resilience, and the quiet courage it takes to rebuild from the ashes. We all face moments where our contributions are overlooked or erased. What moment in your life taught you that keeping receipts isn't cynicism, but survival? Share your story in the comments below. And if this story resonated with you, please like, share, and subscribe for more cinematic dramas drawn from the complexities of real life.